Hello, today we are going to be replacing the original high-speed steel cutter head with a Sheartak spiral carbide cutter head, just on the planer unit, not on the jointer. Now, in order to start with this, to get to the cutter head on the planer, we have to remove the jointer assembly. So let's start with that. The bolts are all 17 millimeters. You'll be able to get to some with a ratchet, but with others you'll have to use an open-end wrench. So remember, when taking this thing off, this assembly is cast iron. It's heavy. And there's a pin here that they use on this side for alignment. So when you take it off, you have to remember that pin is there. So let's swing this one down. Pull that down. Go down there. Here's that pin that I was talking about for alignment. And then just take off the last bolt over here. So now that we have the jointer assembly off, we have access to the opening for the cutter head. You might find it easier to remove the switch and the wire so you have easier access. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove that switch so I can get to this area a little bit easier. Now the connections on this switch are soldered in, so you can't completely get it out of the way without cutting the wires. So I'm going to just leave it kind of out of the way like this. The next step, of course, is taking off the drive belt. Just like with the jointer planer, get in there, just roll it off. Ooh, not good. We have a split belt. I don't frankly know if there are replacements for this belt, so this could be a problem in the future. We'll find out. Now you have access, though, to the cutter head. First thing to do, let's open this up. Two wing nuts. And take the screws, these two screws. Well, the first thing we do to remove the cutter head is we have to remove the old knives and the clamp on the knives, on the clamp that holds the knives in place. Just simply go through and get them off. Just one screw to undo the cover here. And we'll want to expose the cutter head so we can see what's happening. Those two wing nuts are out. And as you can see, I've already removed the knives, the old knives and plates. And now we're going to have to remove this assembly in order to get the cutter head to slide out this way. Now, idlers are a definite pain in the neck. There's no easy way to relieve the tension on this idler so that we can get the chain loose and pull it. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to take this one screw out here so it'll relieve half the tension on the idler. Take this other screw out here so that the whole idler assembly can slide forward as I slide both of these gears forward. We'll see how that works. Okay, let's see if my idea works. Half the spring tension is off, screws out. I've already started pulling with my little puller on both of these gears, and let's see if I can just get it by hand now. I might have to use the puller a little bit more on this guy. Let's set that up and try it. moving the other one. See if we can get it by hand first of all. Yeah, that one's easy. This is the stubborn one up here. There we go. I think we've got it now. Okay, so that worked. A little bit of a challenge. Oh, don't want to lose that. This is the little bushing that goes behind the idler arm. Don't want to lose that. Okay, so now we have that chain off. So now it's just a simple matter of taking this chain off here. These are 13 millimeter bolts, by the way. They're nuts. Easy to take off. Oh, I thought might have to hold this with another one. Let me get something to hold that, keep it from spinning for a moment. So with this nut spinning, let's put this nut back on. See if we can hold it in place just enough to break this free. There we go. Broke that one free. Now with a little bit of, this might be a little tricky here, getting them both free. There we go. That should be enough for both. Well, let's try it. Should be loose enough. Let's just try and grab the chain. Let's see if that's enough. There we go. That did it. Let's take it all off. Now I'm going to grab that chain again. See if it'll come by hand. This one's loose. Oh, there goes my key. Don't want to lose that. And there we are. There goes my other key. So chase down my keys so I don't lose those. And we're ready to take that whole assembly off. There we are. We now have access to these two bolts, which will allow us to then get the cutter head out. And as you can see, I'm a big fan of putting nuts and bolts back in there where they came from, so there's no question of where they go or losing them when I go back to reassemble it. And I'm going to take a vacuum cleaner and suck out all the dust chips, the wood chips for right now. Then we'll go into pulling off these two bolts and pulling out the cutter assembly. Okay, now we're going to try and actually pull the cutter head out of there. Got to undo this little bolt here. Let's just to prevent the cutter head from spinning. Take out these two bolts here. There is a very small pin on the shaft here, right here. you'll have to pull it out, you know, by hand, but it acts as a key, and that'll allow you to pull this spacer out. So I'm going to pull that little tiny pin out, see if I can do it with my fingers. There we go. Don't lose that little tiny pin. Now you can pull out that spacer. So now we have to figure out how to pull this whole assembly out this way. As you might guess, it has been pressed into the bearings. So we're going to have to figure out a way to push this out without destroying those bearings. I certainly recommend that you get new bearings, which Sheartak will provide for you. Modest prices, I recall, $10, $12, something like that. So now I'm going to turn the machine around to show you how I push the cutter head out. It has to be, like I say, the bearings have been pressed in, so you have to tap it out from the other side. And that's, of course, the reason I removed the jointer assembly, is for ease in getting to and being able to tap out the bearings on the other side. So let's spin it around. Okay, so you can see here, we'll eventually have to take this, roller, I guess you'd call it, for the belt off, but for now let's use that to tap out the assembly here. Okay, and you have to line up, so you can see, let me give you an idea, the little cutouts. So, you can see there are little cutouts right up here. So you have to align the cutter head with these cutouts because you can't go that way. So it has to be lined up like that to make sure that you can tap it out. And my little habit of putting in screws has now gotten in the way. So I'll have to get rid of those for a minute, and let's continue tapping it out. And boom, it is now broken free. Voila. One cutter head out. We're not done, of course, because now we have to put in the Sheartak cutter head. I also have to, of course, pull off this little pulley so I can replace that onto the Sheartak cutter head, and also knock these little bearings out here for this little assembly, so I can put that on there as well. So trust that that's pretty easy. All you have to do is 13mm, pull it off, and just tap off the this little assembly off the bearing there. And like I say, I'm getting replacement bearings, so I'm not going to worry too much about what happens to these bearings. One thing that I did note here in pulling off this pulley and going to pull off this pulley, this is a left-hand thread. So make sure you remember that when you go to pull this pulley off. So I'm going to pull off that left-hand thread. Break it free easily enough. And of course, you've got the lock washer and the other washer here. There it is. And let's see if we can pull that pulley off. lose your key. There we go. Let's find the key there. Okay, don't want to lose that. Okay, there's that. Now we have to knock off the this little assembly here. Shouldn't be too difficult. So for this little assembly here, I'm not going to use the puller on it. Rather, I'm going to try tapping it off with a hammer and piece of wood. And by the way, the reason that I'm not using the puller to try and pull this little assembly off, and rather using a piece of wood and tapping around the bearing, is you really can't get parts for the F1000A anymore. And I'm just a little bit worried that if I'm putting a lot of pressure on this cast piece and it doesn't come like I want it to, I'm afraid I might crack it or something. So I feel a little bit better about just tapping it off with a piece of wood. And like I say, you just work your way around the bearing and it slowly comes off. Go. Done. Now that we have the planer all torn apart, we have to replace the cutter heads. You can see the geometry of the original cutter head on the left is completely different than the geometry of the spiral cutter head on the right. The upshot of this is that the opening, which is over here, the opening on the planer will not accommodate the new cutter head. We're going to have to slightly grind away a little bit of the area down here. And I'm going to use a die grinder to do that. It's just a very small part, and I'll show you how best to do that. You could, of course, bring the whole unit down to a metalworking shop or to get a milling machine to take away this little part here. But I think a die grinder is a little bit easier, and most people it'll be easier for them just to use a die grinder. Let's show you how close this is to fitting, but not quite. As you can see, there are 4 ears, shall we say, on the cutter head, and so these openings, of course, will accommodate 2 of the ears, but there's just not quite enough room to get this whole thing in there. So we're going to have to take, like I say, just a little bit off down here, you know, a little groove right down here to allow us to sneak this thing in. One thing you could do, of course, is just trial and error, take a little bit off here, a little bit until everything goes through. What I've done to help myself is I just made a little disc out of fiberboard of the diameter of the cutter head. And the diameter is right around 2 inches. So this is a little 2-inch disc. I'm just going to place it up here. Obviously, I'm not going to take any metal off the top part where it's thin. I'm just going to do it, you know, down below. So when I place that there, I'm just going to make a little note here. No, that's approximately where I'm going to go. Now I don't need to go this whole length from here to here. I probably only need to go about from here to about here. So that'll help guide me in how much to take off. I'll just go down to that line and see if I can fit it on through. One thing you might want to do before you get the die grinder in here is mask off some of the areas that could be affected by metal shavings. I've actually set up a vacuum cleaner, you can see over here, and I'm going to turn that on and hope that that captures most of the metal shavings when I go in there. But I also wanted to see if I could prevent any of these little metal shavings from getting into any of the moving parts. It also goes without saying that you don't want to be breathing or getting metal grindings into your eyes, so wear some protection. don't think I'm even close because I'm not down to the line. Let's take a look. Nope. I'll go ahead and take it all the way down to the line that I marked. Okay, let's see. Take a look. Okay, we are really close, but if you take a look underneath, I see I'm probably deep enough here, but I do need to take a little bit more right here and right here. So let's keep on going. All right, took off just a tiny bit more. See what we got. Let's start up here. Oh, there we go. You have to just kind of twist it in as it goes. But I'm going to pull it back out because I'm going to put the bearing on first. I'm being a little bit aggressive here. So the next thing to do is to press on the bearing before we feed it on through this hole. What I've done is I just drilled a couple of 3/4 inch holes in this wood. It's a little bit easier than tapping around and around and around. So we'll see if we can get this on like that and tap it on. Okay, a few more lub taps should do it, right? Less than a credit card. Okay, I think we are seated. Looks good. Now you're also going to want to put the other bearing assembly on the bench rather than trying to do it while it's in the machine. It's a lot easier. So you have to both press it in to the housing here and also onto the cutter head. Now I do put a little bit of silicone onto the ends. That helps you to drive it on because these are very, very, very tight fittings. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have sprayed just a little bit of silicone around here and also in the bearing race here. Let's see if we can put it all together. That's going in pretty easy. There we go. That was easy. Now we go on here. I may have to modify my blocks because the little lock mechanism is getting in the way. Okay, so I drilled another hole there very close to the edge so that I can place it here. Won't get in the way here of the locking mechanism. Let's try that now. Oh yeah. And we're almost seated. Okay, I think we're set. Okay, we're now ready to feed the cutter head through the access hole and then fit the bearing on the other side. Like I say, you just kind of twist it on through here. Some people wonder whether cutting away the metal will compromise the strength of the bearing on this side. But you have to take, as you can see here, there's actually two bolts that go through and help to hold the entire bearing. So it's not really the shoulders here that are supporting the bearing, it's really the two bolts. So it really doesn't affect it. We almost have it. Messed up here. Got to bring this back. So that I clear here. Actually, what I should have done is taken off this gear here. So let me stop the video and take this off so that I can pull this up so it fits properly. And then we'll resume. Pull the chain of the gears off so I can twist this or turn it so that it's right position. Another time when my mantra, put everything back where it was so you know where it goes, gets in the way. Alright, so okay, we are all the way in, and now of course we have the bearing on the far side that we have to tap into that raceway. So I'm going to get my wooden blocks and start tapping in. Okay, we're going to see if I can do this just by tapping on the end here, and it's working, going in without a problem. Almost seated. Okay, I'm going to do a few more taps. I think we're set. Okay, now, believe it or not, other than setting little carbide cutters in each of the little slots here, it's putting the whole thing back together. Okay, so you may recall that here, let's see if I can zero in on it, there's a little hole. It takes a little pin that acts as a key and holds a spacer in place. So we have our spacer, we have our little tiny pin that goes in and acts as a key for our little stop block. Now the stop block is not going to be particularly as useful as it was for the original cutter head, but it'll still help to lock it in place occasionally in certain locations to help us put on the carbide cutters. So I thought I was having trouble lining up the key slot with the key, but it turns out that a little hole on the new cutter head wasn't drilled deep enough, and so the key sticks out too proud. So I have a choice. I can either try to grind down this key a little bit, or I can drill out that hole a little bit. I'm going to try drilling out the hole and make it just a little bit deeper. Okay, I measured it, and although this is probably metric, 1/8 inch drill seems to work fine. I threw a couple of wedges on the cutter head, hoping that that would prevent it from moving when I try and drill this out a little bit. Let's try it out. See if that's enough. Success. Wasn't too hard. Okay, throw on the washer, lock washer and nut. Again, they're almost all 13mm on this. And I'll try and Maybe I should have kept my wedges in there earlier, or from earlier. Keep this from turning so I can then tighten it down. Okay, I've got a wedge in there. Should be able to tighten that without a problem. There we go. All right. So if you take a look here, we still have 4 stops that we can use. That'll help us put in some of the carbide cutters, but there's only 4 stops. Other than that, you're just going to have to wedge it with a little wood wedge to prevent it from moving as you go ahead and put in each of the cutter heads. Since we're speaking of cutter heads, I'll show you real quick how those go in. Very simple. So each of these, if you can take a look, these little cutter heads go on, and there's a little dot you can see, and that helps you to know, indexing it, shall we say, so you know which edge is being used. And then of course you can rotate as one edge gets dull. You can rotate all of them, and then the little dot helps you to keep track and make sure that they're all the same. But very simple. You just go in here and you can just put them on each of these little areas right here. They provide with all the little screws. They also have a little Torx wrench for you that they give you. You can use it, I suppose, but they also have a torque number, and if you have an inch-pound torque wrench, it'd probably be better to use that. But just to do a quick demonstration, here's the little torque wrench that they give you and the Torx screw. Put one of the little cutters here. I'm going to put the little dot in the upper right-hand corner on all of my cutters. I'll throw them into place. Very simple. And I do happen to have an inch-pound torque wrench, and I'm going to go through with that inch-pound torque wrench and torque them to their specifications. Offhand, I'm not sure what that is. Might have been 45, 50 inch-pounds, but maybe I shouldn't say until I look at their specifications. So there are 40 of these little cutters, and I'm going to put them all in right now. By the way, they give you 5 extras, which is really nice. And you don't need to see me put in all 40. They all go in exactly the same. Okay, I've placed all of the cutter heads onto the cutter block, and now we have to put the chain assemblies back on. First thing, of course, is the rear guard. That's easy enough. I'm just going to hold it in place with a long bolt for now. See it there. Just keep it loosely in place, because we're going to have to attach springs up here for the idler. The first thing to go on is going to be the roller gear chain, the chain that drives the roller. Okay, there are 3 screws that hold this back plate on, and let's see if I can hear. This one here, of course, also holds the idler arm. And then up here is a screw that will hold the spring that will then attach to the idler arm. And then there's the long screw here that just generally holds on the back plate. Now we have to replace the chain assembly off the motor. And I think the easiest way to do this is to first put it on as a unit with the this gear and this gear. Make sure you have your little key here, and this one just slides over that longer key they already put in place. And now once this is on, then you try and put on the idler, or if you prefer to call it the tensioner. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook up the 2 springs into these 2 holes first. And once that's in place, then we will pull it up and insert the last bolt. And on this one, there is a bushing. Take a look here. There's a bushing that goes in back of the arm. Back of the arm. And then, of course, the regular washer on top, lock washer, and the screw. That'll all go in place right there. So let's put it on the springs first. Okay, so what I've done is I've snuck the idler down back behind the chain, and you might have to pull the gears off a little bit away to allow this to get on. Now I have to just hook up these two springs into their holes, and then I'll force this up and put in the final bolt. And I believe I mentioned when taking this apart that idlers can be a real pain. The springs are very, very difficult to work with. In this particular case, what I'm trying to do is I have attached this one spring here, then using a screwdriver I have screwed in this hole. I pulled it up and screwed into this hole. So now what I'm going to try to do, now that I have one spring attached, I will attach the second one here to its hole, and then with a tool, maybe an awl, try and loop it up over its little holder up here. That might be the easiest way to do this. And then of course we'll try to get this last bolt in over here. All right, let's see if I can show you what I'm trying to do here, because this is a rather difficult little maneuver. So I'm going to grab the spring here and pull it up over its perch, and then take a screwdriver, try and shove it back over so it'll drop in there. There we go. Okay, like I say, let's see if we can get this here. The last thing to do is to sneak the bushing behind this arm here and just put the last bolt in. So I got the bushing back behind there. Now, just got to get that last one in there. There we are. And frankly, you may have just done the most difficult part of this whole rebuild. And of course, don't forget to put on the nuts, washer, and lock washers over both of these gears. Now, one other thing I need to do before I put the cover back on this is I clean these chains of a lot of the old grease, or just about all of the old grease. Now I'm going to re-grease them just before I put it on. I think any type of standard automotive grease will do just fine. Okay, everything is done on this side other than putting on the cover. And then we'll move to the other side, put on the pulley. And then for the most part, the planer is done. And the only question is, are we going to do anything with the jointer? Okay, there's not a lot to do on this side other than putting on the plate and putting on the pulley. And then of course putting back the jointer on. Okay, just throw on the plate. And again, I was trying to take it off, although I forgot that this is a left-handed thread. So easy enough to pull that off. Find your little key. And throw your pulley back on.
Special thanks to Gary Redenbacher for shooting this amazing video. We believe it will be very helpful to you. If you like our video, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.